This might just be the most disturbing book I have ever read. Hello, welcome back to Slanky Book Club. I am Cameron, and in today's video I am going to be talking to you guys about all of the weird lit books that I have read and enjoyed. Every single time that I talk about or recommend weird books on TikTok, you guys absolutely eat it up. And so I thought I should really just compile almost every, let's be real, I'm probably going to forget a bunch, but as many as I could think of and find and remember. I scoured my shelves, I went back through my Goodreads, and all of the weird lit books that I have enjoyed are going to be in this video. So here is your master resource. Save this, come back to it, chuck these all into your Goodreads TBR list, because this is the definitive list. So first of all, what the fuck is weird lit? To me, weird lit is a subgenre of the literary fiction world that includes stories that have elements of surrealism. They sometimes have obsessive, delusional, psychopathic even protagonists. And there's often touches of magical realism or horror. One of my favorite creators, who I feel is all over the weird lit subgenre and always has the best recommendations and the most random books that you have never heard of and not seen anywhere else, is Nicole on TikTok. Her handle is @NicoleReads98. She's like the leader of the weird lit world at this point, at least for me. And I am always in the market for weird lit recommendations. So for one thing, whenever Nicole posts a video, I am sat. But also, if you guys have any weird lit, I mean, you're here, so I feel like you're into it. If you have any books that you've read that are weird, that you think are good, please tell me about them, and I will run to Goodreads and add them into my TBR. Okay, I have a lot to get through, so I'm not going to waste any time chatting. I'm just going to dive right into my recommendations, and I'm going to start by getting out of the way my three queens of weird literature. You may have heard of them: Mona, Melissa, and Otessa. They are very much heralded as quite popular authors, at least in the literary fiction side of TikTok, and for good reason. I mean, I can always count on these authors to churn out a book that is at least going to make me say, what the fuck? They often contain unreliable narrators, dream-like sequences, and generally yucky depictions of humans. And all of these things contribute to this overwhelming sense of discomfort and almost confusion that you get while reading their books. So, Mona Awad, she has published 4 books to date. Her debut, 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, the huge on BookTok novel Bunny, the less spoken about All's Well, and her most recent novel Rouge. First, I'm going to give you my ranking of favorite to least favorite of Mona's books. Now, my favorite is All's Well. The least spoken about, I think. Oh, no, 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl is definitely the least spoken about. Anyway, All's Well is my favorite. We then, in very close second, have Bunny. 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl is my third favorite, and my least favorite is her most recent one, Rouge. All's Well follows a completely unreliable narrator. She is an ex-theatre actress turned drama teacher who suffers from chronic pain and is also slowly losing her mind. This book, to me at least, was hilarious. I was so thoroughly entertained the entire time that I was reading this, and as well as that, the reason that it is my favorite of Mona's books is because I believe that it is the best example of her strengths as a writer. I say it all the time, I will continue to say it. Nobody writes a woman slowly losing her mind like Mona Awad. Bunny, which you have probably heard of, follows a moody, introverted MFA student who is lured into the cult-like friendship group of her preppy classmates. On the outside, this sickly clan of prim young women who call each other Bunny seem like your typical sorority vibes, but what actually goes on behind closed doors is much darker. There's a reason this book is so huge on Book Talk. It's fun. You know, it's dark and it's mysterious, but it's playful. It is confusing, but it's also tangible. I think it's a great foray into not just weird literature specifically, but literary fiction in general. I can see why so many people on Book Talk love this book because it keeps you asking questions. 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl is certainly the least kooky of Mona's books, and being her debut, this is understandable. It follows our protagonist, Lizzie, who struggles to make peace with her identity as a fat girl. She has great friends, she dates, she's bloody gorgeous, but in her mind, all of these things are inextricably overshadowed by her fatness. We follow her over the course of many years as she becomes more and more obsessed with her weight, going to extreme and often unhealthy measures to lose it. This book, more than any of Mona's others, is a character study. It has a lot of heart, it is brutal, it has been criticized, but at its core, it's a commentary on how one's perception of their physical self can have such power over their mental health. Lastly, we have Rouge. Now, to contrast, this is Mona's most recent release. It came out last year and it is her most strange novel. She really pushes the limits of absurdism in this story. It follows a woman whose mother has just passed away and she goes back interstate somewhere to her mother's house to clean it out. And while she's there, she's lured in by this dark, mysterious beauty treatment center. Now, things become very surreal very quickly. Things are not what they seem. And what's really going on is never fully clarified to the reader. In typical Mona fashion, we have cult themes and we have an unreliable narrator who seems to be losing her mind a bit. We're not really sure what she's just imagining or what she's dreaming or what's actually happening. Just quietly, like I said, it was my least favorite of Mona's. I just think it was a little bit too bizarre for my likings. Next up, we have Melissa Broder. Now, she has published 3 novels, a collection of personal essays, and 5 poetry collections. I don't do poetry, but I have read her novels and a collection of personal essays. I don't know where the other 2 of her books that I have are, but here are 2 of them. Her personal essay collection, So Sad Today, addresses themes of disordered eating, depression and anxiety, and addiction. It is unflinching, it is devastating, and it is darkly funny. Melissa is not afraid to go where a lot of people will not go, and she does it with such a sharp self-awareness and cutting humor, and it's this that makes her such an admirable writer. Now I'm going to quickly rank my most to least favorite of Melissa's 3 fiction novels. My favorite is Milk Fed. Then we have The Pisces, and then my least favorite is Death Valley. Now, Milk Fed is my, like I said, most favorite Melissa Broder book. It has not left my brain. It's like my Roman Empire. It follows a woman with an eating disorder who befriends the Orthodox Jewish woman working at the local frozen yogurt shop. And this Orthodox Jewish woman working at the local frozen yogurt shop becomes intent on feeding her. What emerges is an extremely erotic and intense story bursting with desire. Now, this book has been criticized for fat phobia, but, and I say this as a thin person, if you ask me, the protagonist literally just has an eating disorder. So, of course the protagonist is fat phobic. The Pisces, Melissa's debut novel, is probably her most fun book to read. It follows a woman who, after going through a breakup and essentially hitting rock bottom, goes to dog sit for her rich sister, and while she's there, has a love affair with a merman. Yeah, this is obviously a very absurd story, but it's not a fantasy novel, it's not a romance novel. This is weird lit. Now, I really enjoyed reading this book. It was very silly, but a very enjoyable, well-written read. I do, though, feel the need to point out the fact that there is an element of animal cruelty that I didn't really rock with, although I do see its narrative purpose. And Death Valley, the most recent release from Melissa Broder, and much like Mona Awad's Rouge, Melissa is really pushing the absurdism in this latest novel. This follows a woman, she's a writer, and she leaves her dying father and chronically ill husband to go away to the desert to research the desert for her latest novel. Now, while she is exploring this desert, wandering around, she encounters or imagines, we're not really sure, a ginormous cactus with a vaginal opening, which she naturally climbs inside of. What follows is a series of events largely consisting of the protagonist lost in the desert that we aren't really sure if they're hallucinations, if they're really happening, if she's dreaming. We're not really sure what's going on. Now, just for the record, Melissa Broder's poetry collections, if you're into poetry, I have not read them, are Super Doom, Last Sext, Scarecrow, Meat Heart, and When You Say One Thing But Mean Your Mother, which I kind of love that title. The last of my weird lit queens is none other than Otessa Moshfegh, the author of the now BookTok famous book that woke me up to the world of literary fiction and showed me just how weird stories can be. Now, I have read all of Melissa's books except for her first novella, which is called McGlue, and to be honest, I have no interest in reading McGlue, but these are her other 5 published novels, and this is my ranking. From favourite to least favourite, we have, of course, My Year of Rest and Relaxation in number 1 place. Then we have her short story collection, Homesick for Another World. Third place is Lapvona, her most recent book. Coming in 4th, second to last, is Eileen, and my least favourite, Death in Her Hands. Now, I mean, of course, I have to say that my favourite of Otessa's books is the one that rocked my world. I saw this very cool cover on the new release shelf of a bookstore back in 2018, and I thought, sick, love that. Bit of pink, looks very cool. And it really just opened my eyes to how silly and fun and weird and absurd adult fiction can be. Now, this book very much has now become very famous on BookTok. It's arguably like one of the figureheads of the literary fiction space. But if somehow you haven't heard of it or you don't know what it's about, it essentially follows a young, entitled, selfish woman who is fed up with the world and decides to embark on a year-long drug-induced sleep. Now, yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine on the surface how this could be at all entertaining. Like, what do you even do with a story where your protagonist is asleep the entire time? For starters, she's not actually fully asleep the entire time. There are a lot of sort of blackout states and like hazy, she's like semi-awake and functioning and interacting with people, but it is just so funny and unexpected and witty. It's just unlike any book. It was ahead of its time, we'll say that. Now, Otessa's short story collection is, I think, the perfect sort of way to dip your toe into Otessa Moshfegh's writing. It's called Homesick for Another World, and it's a collection of brilliant little stories about gross little people doing gross little people things, and I think it's a great way to step into the weird lit world, but also to really explore Otessa's style without committing to a whole extended story with the same characters. Lapvona is Otessa's most recent novel, and it is a slight deviation from her usual style, as it is set in a strange kind of medieval-esque town that sort of transcends time. True to Otessa, it is very gross. Probably her grossest book, to be honest, and it is full of very weird characters. Now, I was really nervous going into this. I'm always nervous when an author I love who has a distinct style strays from that style at all. But of course, as an author, why would you want to keep churning out the same thing over and over again? I get it, and Otessa absolutely pulled this off. Eileen is Otessa's debut novel after she published her novella McGlue. Now, this is set in the 60s, and it follows Eileen, a young woman who's completely disenfranchised with her life. She works at the local prison, she lives with and cares for her alcoholic father, and then one day this glamorous, beautiful woman named Rebecca comes to work at the prison, and Eileen becomes so obsessed with her. Now, this book has been turned actually into a film starring Anne Hathaway that I am waiting to come out in Australia because I am dying to see it. And Death in Her Hands, my least favourite. This follows a elderly widow who finds a mysterious note on the ground in the woods while she's walking her dog. And this note implies a murder, and the woman becomes obsessed with solving it. Now, she is pretty unreliable as a narrator, so it's kind of impossible to know what's really going on. And what's interesting about this book is that it's sort of a satire of itself. Like, it very much is written within the framework of a mystery crime novel, but it's also making fun of that genre. And to be honest, it just didn't land for me. Okay, now that we have gotten those three authors out of the way, I'm going to pick up the pace and I'm going to run you through all of my recommendations for some great, weird lit that I think you should read. And we're going to start with my favorite read from last year. I'm sure you've probably heard about it. It's all anyone on the socials has been talking about recently. It is, of course, I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is a dystopian speculative fiction. It was published in 1995. Translated from French as well. And it basically is about this group of 40 women who have been locked underground in this empty bunker, guarded by men for countless years. They don't know how long it's been. And then one day, this blaring alarm sounds, and the men just drop everything and disappear. So then the youngest girl in the group of 40 women becomes their key to survival and navigating the world. Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawler. Now, this is a gender-bending magical realism story. Paul is a queer shapeshifter whose fluid identity changes to suit his romantic partners. We follow him as he navigates life in 90s America. Death in Spring by Merce Rodriguez, I want to say. This was published posthumously and is translated from Spanish. Now, this is a coming-of-age story, essentially, but weird. It is set in a very strange town in the Catalan mountains that is kind of cut off from the rest of the world, and it is ripe with violent and bizarre customs that this boy is forced to reckon with as he grows up and becomes a man. Fresh Water by Akwaeke Emezi. This is the debut from this impressively versatile author. It's a largely abstract story about a Nigerian woman who contains multiple selves. They're referred to as Ogbanji, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, which is an Igbo concept of evil spirits, but also refers to a personality disorder. Now, this is a exploration of identity and trauma, and the story is apparently largely based on Akwaeke's own experience. My Husband by Maud Ventura. This is a French translation. Now, this is about a deeply, deeply devoted wife. She is obsessed with her husband and with doing everything she possibly can to please him, but she keeps score, and if and when he doesn't follow her script, there are punishments. And a great twist at the end. The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. This is another dystopian speculative fiction. This is about a family who have moved to an essentially deserted island to protect their daughters. The men of the world and their inherent violence has begun to make the women of the world sick, and a practice called the Water Cure, which the girls spend their days undergoing, is the only protection. Then one day the father goes missing and 3 men wash ashore, and life as they know it begins to unravel. A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers is a deliciously pretentious novel written in the style of a memoir. It's about a psychopathic food critic and serial killer who is recounting her travels, her love affairs, her dining experiences, and most stunningly, her murders. Now, this might just be the most disturbing book I have ever read. Tender as the Flesh by Agustina Basterica. This is a Spanish translation set in a dystopian world where a virus has rendered all animal meat inedible, poisonous to humans. So, as a solution, the world has begun to farm human meat. We follow a slaughterhouse worker as he grapples with this new way of life. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, another very disturbing work by an Argentinian author. Something's going on over there in Argentina. This is a short story collection though, and it is verging on horror. It is full of creepy stories, magical realism, bit of body horror, and a lot of just general yuckiness. Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder follows a housewife who is very much unfulfilled and disenfranchised with her life as a stay-at-home mum. And then one day she wakes up to find that she is turning into a dog. Like a literal domestic dog. Is she losing her mind, or is she actually transforming? Hot Milk by Deborah Levy is a book that very much feels like a sweaty fever dream. It is very strange. It follows a young woman who accompanies her mother to Spain to see a eccentric specialist doctor. Her mother is chronically ill with some mysterious illness, and this guy is the only guy who knows how to treat it. While the young woman is there, she swims with jellyfish, hooks up with a lifeguard, and falls in love with a very sexy woman. Dogs of Summer by Andrea Abreu is a brutal exploration of girlhood in its rawest form. This is a Spanish translation that follows 2 young girls over one hot summer as they become increasingly fascinated with their sexuality and each other. Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield is a deeply disturbing psychological body horror that follows a woman who returns home to her wife from a deep sea voyage that was thought to have gone missing. But she is changed, and as her wife tries desperately to find out what went on while they were down there, things are rapidly falling apart. And finally, one of my favorite weird girl fiction books. Women fucking up men is such a fun trope to me. Oh, am I allowed to say that? Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. Oh, this follows a very self-obsessed, very egocentric basically selfish, shitty person. Photographer who scouts her subjects out on the street, out in the world, and charms them and brings them home and gets them to perform pretty demeaning acts for her to photograph. There you have it. That is my very large collection. I want to hold it all up for you guys, but I literally cannot even handle. I've already dropped 2. Here are all of my favorite weird lit books. Okay, oh my gosh. I shouldn't be lifting all of that. Thank you for staying so long. I hope you have a very comprehensive list now of books that you want to read. I took a lot of books out of my shelf for this. I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching, as always. I love you. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Bye!